Well, how about that? There we go. It's quite clear Severin couldn't find anybody to sing, so we called Linda to come in today. Welcome to Pacific Unitarian Universalist Church. We are a welcoming community here, sitting high atop the South Bay. We intend to be a welcoming community, a place of justice, and where justice meets tolerance, a place where your mind gets challenged and ideally your heart gets opened. A couple of quick announcements. I think I can announce this. Gabby, our administrative assistant, is pregnant, if you don't know that. And I probably wouldn't announce that and if it was not for, she really wants to be, she didn't get her booster, so she really wants us to keep her distance. So you'll see a little sign there, so don't, stay outside if you don't mind. She's has some compromised folks in her immediate life. We got the Senior Covenant group this week starting on Tuesday. We are back with the deeper dive conversations on race this afternoon. On Wednesday, the writing group meets both on Zoom and live. It's at 10 o'clock. You still have time to write something and come. It's an open group where our topic is conversations with a famous person. So you in dialogue with some famous person. Let's see. We're going to meet after church today, right out at the picnic benches, for anyone who wants to be involved with supporting Afghan refugees. So we're starting to ramp that up. Barbara Marriott's our key person. We're in the library. Okay, we've moved. Okay, so we're going to be in the library. Communicating with different groups. We're going to figure out what it is we're doing, which is good news. Christmas Eve, 5 o'clock. Kind of early, but that's when we usually do it. So 5 o'clock, it's dark. It's a good chance to come and do a bunch of other things. Let's see. We have the gift drive. Here's my prompt for the gift drive for the kids of Rainbow Services. Yeah. Okay. You've made your point. Give to the gift drive. Next Sunday, right after church, as quickly as possible, we're going to do the fall financial review, which is the halfway point sort of update on where our finances are, a little bit of forecasting headed forward about what faces us and what opportunities have us, and we're ideally minutes from being able to announce we've hired the MOAD RE director person, so we're very close on that. We're just waiting for screening stuff to come through. On Sunday the 19th, who here is not a member but might be interested in being a member? Not all at once. Anyway, so we're going to have a class on the 19th after church, which is a new member class. We get a chance to get to know you a little bit better, tell a little bit about the history of this church and the UU movement in general. Basically, we field questions, and we could always use folks for the greeter table and the sort of welcoming community. Some interesting developments coming up. We're gonna, looks like we're gonna be able to have a mixed book group that's gonna run on Saturday mornings with a group of Islamic people. I think a lot of them will be women. And we're gonna read No God But God, which is by Reza Aslan, and do a book group with sort of a mixed group of us and, Islamic practicing folks here. So that'll be interesting. And then it looks as though we're also kind of pairing up for a speaker series around ecology, maybe around the different themes, air, fire, earth, water, that kind of stuff, and having speakers come in and, are experts in those particular areas. That's shaping up as well. Okay, I'm going to invite Ted up to read our chalice words, and I'm going to light our chalice and our Hanukkah candles.
It is a blessing to be. It is a blessing to be here. It is a blessing to be here now. It is a blessing to be here now together.
Thank you, Ted. That might be the most Jewish thing I've ever done. So today's sermons, before we head into the music, I wanted to write a sermon on sort of the meaning of life. Like every once in a while I go, what is the meaning of life, as we all do? And I started to, in the search, I started to sort of look for quotes just to get me started, the profound quotes. And then I ended up falling into that rabbit hole and basically using the quotes as a building block for the sermon. So I took famous quotes I really liked, and then I kind of wove the sermon in between them, so we'll see if that works. It's kind of funny, it's a little bit hard, it's existential, it's comical at the same time. So hopefully that'll be meaningful to all of us, and I turn it over to Shayna and Severin and the gang. For our opening hymn.
Here we have gathered side by side, circle of kinship, come and step inside. May all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who seek here feel they have been heard. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered to celebrate. Together a lifetime, let us not forget. Ages, women, children, men, infants and sages, sharing what we can. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Life has its battles, sorrows and regret, but in the shadow let us not forget. Now we gather in each other's name, together heal us as we get Sing now together, share this our heart's own song.
I'd like to invite our young and young at heart down for the children's moment. Got any kids here? Come on down. All right. Pressure's on. Okay, so this is our second week of dealing with Hanukkah. So, you know the Greek gods? Have you heard of the Greek gods? Zeus and like Aphrodite and sort of. Well, anyway, so this connects these two. So, this is a story about Hanukkah. Do you know the story at all? Could you give me? We'll play along here. We got it up on the screen. This is King Antiochus, and he's the Greek leader. And the Greeks had come in and taken over Jerusalem at the time, and he suggested that he wanted all the Greek gods to be worshipped by the Jewish people. This is an empire thing. They like to take over. And so he said, we want you to worship the sun god and the god of fire and all these gods. And here we go. And then there was resistance by a guy named Matthias Hasman, and he was a priest. And Jewish people have been very loyal to their God. That's like they're a little bit more jealous. God is jealous and the people are loyal. It's kind of one of the persistent qualities of being Jewish. One of the more admirable qualities is this kind of commitment and loyalty to the one God. Jewish people are among the earliest of people who believed in one God. That's kind of one of their claims to fame. And so in order to, he got angry at the Jewish people for resisting, and he sent horses in through the temple, and then he basically sort of defiled the place. And the way I thought of it was comparing it to you guys is, like if like you were certain, it would be like going into your room and putting up all these things that you hated all over your bedroom, right? Like all these things that you just, like your friends were kind of playing a prank on you, but a much more serious prank because it's the temple. And they put up a statue of Zeus, and you know how the Jewish people keep kosher and don't eat pigs and stuff? They roasted pigs in the temple just to be challenging and just really basically defiled the place, as the word used. And he went beyond that and he said anyone found worshiping God will be killed. And that was sort of all the Jewish people could take. And then Matthias was the father. He had a number of sons, and he was a rebel from an earlier revolt against their own Jewish people. And then his son, and they went into the woods and they kind of trained and they sort of lived. They escaped from the city. A lot of Jewish people did at that time, and they basically, participated in a guerrilla revolution in their own country, and they fought well. And so Maccabees is a word for fighter, and they had battles, and they eventually beat the Greeks out of town. Usually, as you might notice politically, it's very hard for any big country to go into a different country and eventually win the people over. It tends sort of not to work. I think Afghanistan is an example of that, right? And then, so they kicked the Jewish leaders that didn't belong in the temple out of the temple, and they went in and they started to clean it up and make it more acceptable. And this is where the Hanukkah lights come in. So they had just a little bit of temple that had the seal of the high priest on it. So it was like sacramental oil, but there wasn't much of it. And they decided that they were going to light it to purify the temple. It was a symbolic act of purifying the temple, but they didn't have enough to fully purify the temple. At least they thought that. And yet, miraculously, at least in story time telling of it, that small amount of oil just kept burning, kind of miraculously. It's almost like a drink that you were really thirsty, but it just never seemed to come to an end, right? Very similar in the stories of Jesus with the loaves and fishes, where there's not enough fish and loaves, but similar kind of miracle story. And so they eventually got the temple up to speed, and they were back in the capital city again, and then they lit the candles. So the 8 candles were we light these candles, it's the menorah, and we light them you put them in one direction and you light them in the other direction, and I think I'm one short. That one out, okay. Another miracle for Hanukkah. And they light the candles, and now there's a whole series of traditions around potato latkes and spinning the dreidel. But essentially, it's a memory of the courage of the people to honor their gods and to hold fast to their traditions, and God's aid in purifying the temple with the miraculous oil. And it's been reinterpreted a lot of different times, and it's also, as one of our kids said, it's come a parallel to Christmas because there's a gift-giving tradition attached to it too, which is a later addition to the holiday. So that's Hanukkah, which is one of not really that big a Jewish holiday in the canon of Jewish holidays, but it's become a big holiday in part because it parallels Christmas. There we go. Hanukkah. Yeah. Super. Let's sing out our kids with our Singing Out Our Kids song.
Go now in peace, go now in peace. Let the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
There is one announcement I forgot to make, and Angela's arrival too reminded me of this. On the 12th, next Sunday, I think there's still space to come. We're having the last of the 4 series of open racial conversations, and there are great opportunities. We sit in small groups, and there's a prompting question regarding race and your relationship to it that allows conversation to be facilitated. So that's been a great little addition to our fall, and happy to have Tu and Angela here, Tutu and Angela here. Let's sing our centering hymn. I think we mostly know this one, or mumble along to the degree you feel safe under your masks.
Spirit of life, come to me.
Now time for joys and concerns. And I invite anyone who wishes to share a joy or concern. I'm going to light a candle for Chelsea, who is recovering and at home, but still lots of doctor's appointments. She had a whole, stomach surgery, and it's, she's in some pain here and there, and still muddling back to health, I think, is the safest way to describe it. But, she's bouncing around. Yep. Yep.
I have a joy. We have a wonderful concert this afternoon. It's a trio. Yours, Dory, heard it Friday night. Anyway, it's a piano, a cello, and a violin.
I think that's working better.
Anyway, it's really exquisite.
Tagore writes, "The same stream of life that runs through my veins night and day runs through the world and dances in rhythmic measure. It is the same life that shoots in joy into dust, from dust into the blades of grass that break into the tumultuous waves of leaves and flowers. The same stream of life is rocked in the ocean cradle of birth and death in ebb and flow. I feel my limbs are made glorious by the touch of this world of life, and my pride from the life throb of ages dancing in my blood this moment." I'm going to read that one more time. "The same stream of life that runs through my veins night and day runs through the world." It's true. It dances in rhythmic measure. It is the same life that shoots in joy through the dust of earth in numberless blades of grass and breaks into tumultuous waves of leaves and flowers. It is the same life that is rocked in the ocean cradle of birth and death in ebb and flow. I feel my limbs are made glorious by the touch of this world of life, and my pride is from the life throb of ages dancing in my blood this moment. That's the ebb and flow of life, right? Beauty and then tragedy. My friend Stephen Chick's a very thoughtful guy. He's my mentor. He wrote this responsive reading. You ready? What's to learn? What's to learn? What's to learn? What's there to learn? What's there to learn? What's to learn? What's to learn? In living your life, what's to learn? What's to learn? Cool, isn't it? Like I said, I designed this sort of service, and I was really not intending to do this quotables is how I titled it, but I was really just sort of looking for some inspiration to think about the meaning of life, and then I realized, well, there we go. So Kurt Vonnegut begins this. He writes in Cat Cradle in the beginning, God created the earth, and he looked upon it, and in his, he uses his, cosmic loneliness, God said, let us make living creatures out of mud so the mud can see what we have done. And God created every living creature that now moveth and was human. Mud, as humans alone, could speak. God leaned close to the mud. The person sat up, looked around, and spoke. The human blinked. What is the purpose of all this? The human asked politely. Everything must have a purpose, God said. Certainly, said the human. Then God said, I leave it to you to think of one, and went away. Which is about how it works. We, like Vonnegut's first human, all ask the question of life, and I stand before you today in this remarkable moment in the first quarter of the 21st century, the very beginning of the second millennium in terms of the way we mark the calendar now. Ready? Wait for it. We don't know. In fact, we know more than we don't know. We've never been less sure of the purpose than we are right now, which is a weird kind of progress, I suppose. And we are leading the charge of not knowing, aren't we? But our innate curiosity begs us to ask, what is the meaning of life, doesn't we? Almost can't resist. It's just inevitably going to come up. We was told directly by Socrates, who we take a lead from, that life that does not examine its own meaning is not fully lived. As he says, the unexamined life, as we all know, is not worth living. And I think there's some truth to that. That's kind of right. We are people who pay attention and look for clues as to what it's all about and how we should live and why. And then the American philosopher Martha Nussbaum says, knowledge is no guarantee of good behavior, but ignorance is a virtual guarantee of bad behavior when it comes to these questions. And there's some truth to that. And that sentiment is confirmed by Ayn Rand, who says, you can avoid reality. Ayn Rand causes an oh sometimes. Also smart. You can avoid reality, but you cannot avoid the consequences of avoiding reality, which is true. As does Viktor Frankl, who says, challenging the meaning of life is the truest expression of the state of being human, and that might actually be true. Einstein, we think of as being pretty smart, and he's frequently quoted on this journey of quotations for saying famous things and regarding meaning and encouraging wonder around these hard questions. He was not only brilliant, he was also, philosophical in the way that we tend to be. He goes so far as to offer this practical advice. He says, be a loner. That gives you time to wonder and search for truth. Have a holy curiosity to make your life worth living. So he's sort of pro-speculation, at least in this quote. And then he says the most important thing is to not stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. But sort of as we all reluctantly know, that even if we are called to seek life's meaning, the answer isn't clear. In fact, Einstein himself says as much. He says, human beings, vegetables, or cosmic dust all dance to a mysterious tune intoned in the distance by an invisible piper. That's pretty, isn't it? Same with that life throb that Tagore says. Although Einstein is always famously trying to prod our imagination into action on such questions, Others taint this encouragement with a word of caution. Robert Louis Stevenson says, "The great part of life consists in contemplating what we cannot cure." True. And author Peter DeVries says it this way: "The universe is like a safe in which there is a combination, but the combination is locked up in the safe." Dana likes that one. Pretty cute and true. Physicists would say the same thing, I think. And then the ever helpful little nihilist Charlie Brown goes so far to bring his existential question in. He says, more in The Frustrating Life, that in the book of life, the answers aren't even in the back. Truth is, I don't believe it is the nature of life to have meaning, or at least yield its meaning. First and foremost, life just is. I think that is growth when you come to accept that. Life, first and foremost, just is. And in terms of meaning, most engaged in this question want to remind us that we are coming to see that the question comes from us, right? More than the question exists there. It's part of the question is built into the unique way our minds work. As Anais Nin cleanly says, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. We seemingly unlike any other earthly creature are the balance of being smart enough to ponder big questions without being wise enough to answer them, if there even is an answer. Some minds offer us a real sense of caution around these questions. Albert Camus says it this way: "You will never be happy if you continue to search for what happiness consists of. You will never live if you are looking for the meaning of life." Some cautionary there, spending too much time on speculation. He and Socrates could have a fight. Big thinkers like Umberto Eco hold up the same cautionary sign. "I've come to believe that the whole world is an enigma, a harmless enigma that is made terrible by our own mad attempt to interpret it as though it had an underlying truth." You wouldn't get this in a Baptist church, I can tell you that. And for Camus, the pondering can be very distracting, even harmful. For as if there is a sin against life, it consists perhaps not so much in despairing of life as in hoping for another life and eluding the implacable grandeur of this life. Similarly, from Psychology Today reminds us that the clock is ticking on our own lives while we spend time pondering. Psychology Today, I didn't get the author, says, "You can accept responsibility and live accordingly, or you can retreat from the responsibility, not act, procrastinate, hold out for ultimate truth, and succeed only in defining yourself as a disappointed dream, hope, wish, or expectation." We're in a little cynical part of the sermon here. As Doug Adams says, you do need to move on. The chances of finding out what is really going on are so absurdly remote as the only thing to do is to just keep yourself occupied. A little bit of that tone is there where he says, what's the answer to the meaning of life? He says 23. Mythic academic Joseph Campbell seems to concur. Life has no meaning. Each of us has meaning and we bring it to life. It is a waste to be asking the question when you are the answer. And Minister Harry Ward Beecher says, God asks no person whether he or she will accept life. That is not the choice. We're given life. As for Edwin Robinson, the answer to all contemplation is simple. Life is a game that must be played. Let's take a pause to digest that the biggest minds seem to smartly vote on both sides, not only of what the meaning of life is, which seems hard to find, but really how valuable it is to even engage in those questions. However, it is not the only issue in how any of us approach the meaning of life. Einstein, returned to again, says, there are only two ways to live life, really. One is though nothing is a miracle. The other is though everything is a miracle. And he's right. Passively or actively, we have to come to some kind of orientation as to how we're going to approach the inexplicable truth that here we are, and what meaning we're going to draw from that. So even though we live in a universe that offers no answers that we can all agree upon for sure, we must not forget that, as Martin Fisher says, life is a ticket to the greatest show on earth. And George Bernard Shaw posits us to suppose the world were only one of God's jokes. Would you work any less to make it a good joke instead of a bad one? And as the folk singer Vance Gilbert says, be a witness to joy. That attitude of sort of we turn the corner a little bit, that one can take when one looks upon life as something like a miracle, might be summed up in the sense of wonder. Dr. Sun Wolf, fun phrase, whoever invented fantasy, redwood trees, and apple pie for breakfast, well done. As we all know, living with this level of joy consistently is difficult, particularly in light of our inherent vulnerability, because as we all know too well, every week we hear about it, life is tenuous and scary, because inevitably, the we that we know is only, at least in this form, a biological phenomenon, temporary as it may be. An unknown author phrases it this way: life is a whim of several billion cells put together to be you for a while. Similarly, as the famous Roman writer Ovid concurred, all human things hang on a slender thread, and the strongest fall with a sudden crash. And this brings up the understandable fear. So as an article in Psychology Today phrases it, the future is uncertain. Things do not always happen as we wish. There are some things that are not within your control, and you cannot know all. This is the human condition. It's true. Maybe the best expression of our awareness of the ominous position comes not in words, but in the single visual. The Norwegian painter Edvard Munch described our fate poignantly around the turn of the last century with this painting, The Scream. At present, the most expensive painting ever sold, somewhere over $100 million. William Lyon Phelps describes so concisely with just a few words: the fear of life is the favorite disease of the 20th century. So as magical in his fantasy and redwoods are and apple pie for breakfast is, Robert Brault and McLaughlin say so well, there is a lesson we learn early and harmlessly, or late and traumatically. There are things we can break that our parents can't fix. And in addition to that, this is one of my favorites. Puritans will never believe it, but life is full of disagreeable things that aren't even good for you. Life is unfair. It might be cosmically made fair in an afterlife, but without question in this life, as Dennis Woolley says, expecting the world to treat you fairly because you were good is like expecting the bull not to charge because you are a vegetarian. As Fred Allen describes a bit too strongly, I think, the world is a grindstone and life is your nose. It brings a little joy to laugh at the truth of all of it, doesn't it? I think it's time to accept that our lives are spent spinning pretty comfortably, for the most part, on the edge of a planet perfectly situated in distance and angle from the sun. Is it both itself a miracle? Think about that. And an ominous, terrifying, vulnerable position to be conscious of being in. And I think that that really frames the lives we must create to have meaning in. Our lives are both a miracle and a terrifyingly vulnerable thing. This is a blessed place in which there is no chance of avoiding the trouble. Think about that. Do you live there? I do. Trouble is awaiting, trouble is here, and it's also magical. Said another way with this image of the beautiful little baby and the train that ran off the second floor runway. Life is a struggle within the context of an inexplicable and unlikely context. As Frederick Bueger, the minister in Chicago around the middle of the last century, about 70 years ago, phrased it, here is the world. Beautiful and terrible things will happen. Don't be afraid. Take a minute. I'm going to run around with the microphone in a second. Take a minute to ask yourself how you are presently dealing with these unavoidable life truths. Ask yourself if you are comfortable with the way you are engaging in the miracle and tragedy dynamic. Have you struck an appropriate balance of reflection and action in your life? A balance of being curious about questions and yet consistently moving forward and living your life? How are you doing with the question of meaning in your life? Marie Curie says, "Have no fear of perfection. You will never reach it." Any thoughts? There we go. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah. Any comments? Yeah.
It seems like having difficulty and then stepping up to it, confronting it, and overcoming it is a joy.
And it certainly can be, right? Absolutely, yeah.
I had to step up on November 12th. And I didn't mention this in my joy and sorrow, but it seems to fit in at this point. I was home at 9:30 at night. That's a Friday night. And the lights in my house dimmed. So I thought it was a squirrel or a rat or some critter in my attic causing the lights in the bathroom to dim. I got irritated, flipped it off and on, and it was still dim. Went into the office right next to it, and I have a relatively small house, 1,200 square feet. It's not small, it's 1,200 square feet. It's a great size. And I came out of the office, and I heard a horrible noise in the living room. I went down to the living room, and here are flames eating up my curtain on my front wall. I set down the lamp, picked up the fire extinguisher. And part of the reason I'm saying this is because you should check your fire extinguishers regularly. B, if you buy a new fire extinguisher, do me a favor, don't do what I did. Make sure you pull off the cable tie that's holding the pin in, because I couldn't use my fire extinguisher. So I calmly, within 5 seconds, put the fire extinguisher down, walked outside, turned on the water that's just opposite that wall where the flames are reaching higher and higher because they're just eating up the curtain. I turned on the water, grabbed the hose that was right there, dragged it in the house, and put out the fire. There was no time to call 911, and besides, I was in my nightshirt with my phone back at the other end of the house. So I'm super grateful that I was able to do all that. And I don't know why I was so calm, but I was. And I just methodically did something to solve the problem. So I've had both sides of the coin just recently.
interesting mix. Robin is going to tell us the meaning of life. Robin, no pressure.
In our chalice circle, we were talking recently about mentors, or like how, different people over our lifetime who've taught us things, whether explicitly, but more likely implicitly. And then I know for me that reflection and creativity really renews my spirit, but it takes a while, and I have to give that space to happen.
I think the summary of what you said is that the questions matter a lot more than the answers. So what's important is that you're searching for meaning rather than that you come up with an answer or that you don't come up with an answer.
And that's balanced with just living your life, too. I mean, you have to sing your question, Linda.
The meaning of life for me is that Christmas is right around the corner, and I cannot tell you how many times I have looked and have seen people without, even though we have many organizations that, of course, reach out and help these people. I happened to be, in the last couple of days, weighted down by some packages, things to do, and I looked in front of me to my left, and there was a young guy, maybe in his 30s, anybody's son, anybody's nephew, somebody's brother, and he was kind of lopsided, digging through trash. The light was changing, he was trying to get across the street. I looked, and this man had no shoes. I had just left a store, so I had packages of clothes. I couldn't get to him. But then I looked down again, and the man had no socks. And I looked again, and the man's feet were so dirty, of course, and I had nothing. I couldn't reach him. By this time, he had kind of wobbled across the street. And there are so many people that I have seen within the last week that don't have. And I just don't know how to reach out to these people and get to them all. There are so many. But the blessing is that there are many hearts like mine that want to reach out and help these people. So remember, we are very, very fortunate and very, very blessed. Please don't ever forget that. That is the meaning of life for me.
Last response from Angela.
I believe in miracles, and I encounter them every day in the people that I meet and the situations that I face. And I'm going to share a story that involves this church. I was coming up for one of the Sunday night suppers, and I always bring some cash with me. It was $250 that particular night. And I had been in a time crunch. I had it in my pocket. I went home to put them in envelopes and put thank you notes, and the money was gone. I was really upset. I drove to Trader Joe. I drove to my parking lot. It was just gone. And so I had to quick run and get some cash that night. Tutu kept telling me, forget about it. I was very upset. It's a lot of money. And last week, I was writing a card to a friend whose husband died during the year of COVID in 2020, and this will be her first holiday alone. And she doesn't have children. She also lost a sister-in-law. So I was sending her a card, and Tutu makes these beautiful cards. I pulled a bunch out. I opened, and out fell $300. I mean, I didn't even know it was in this drawer. I hadn't been in this drawer for literally a year. And they just fell out of this one card, and I ran up to two, and I said, did you put this money in here? And he said, no. He said, can I have half of that? Joys and miracles.
tell you one thing I'm grateful. Remember when I had my ankle? I couldn't move around at all. It's still not great, but it's pretty good. Okay. Loosen up your wallets, peoples. There was children, they were drawing in a religious education class one day, and the teacher asked the kids to draw whatever they wanted. And the teacher hovered over this one girl and asked, "What are you drawing, Susie?" And Susie said, "I'm drawing God." And the teacher said, "That's great, but nobody really knows what God looks like." And the girl said, "They will when I'm done." I think we might need ushers. Do you need a microphone? Margot and I are going to pass the plate while we listen.
Everybody's talking about heaven on earth. I've got more than my share. Haven't got a care. Happy all day through. The wonderful, wonderful, wonderful world. Loving wonderful you. It's a wonderful world. I'm just walking on air. I got living on earth. I've got more than my share. Haven't got a care. Happy all day through. It's a wonderful world, loving wonderful you. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful world. I'm just walking on air. Everybody's talking about heaven on earth. I've got more than my share. Haven't got a care. Happy all day through. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful world. Loving wonderful you. Loving wonderful you.
Please join me in our affirmation of gratitude. Let us be grateful when we are able to give, for many do not have that privilege. Let us be grateful for all those who share their gifts, for we are enriched by their giving. And let us also be grateful, even in our needs, so that we may experience the generosity of others. Pretty cool, isn't it? Feels good to give. Our closing hymn is not going to be one more step. It's going to be Glory, Glory, Hallelujah, number 201 in our hymnal. Not that you're holding them. Yeah, but wait a minute. Let's just enjoy that moment for a minute. I think it was just, I'm looking over at our Jewish soprano singing with our guest African-American gospel singer and the rest of us, and the world's healthier and just healed just a little bit. Healed just a little bit. Here's our closing words. You might be familiar with them. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences, beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together. Binds us together in spite of time and death and the space between the stars. We pause in silent witness to that great unity. May the blessing of love be upon you. May love's peace abide with you. May love's presence illuminate your hearts now and forevermore. So be it. Amen. Shalom. Salam. Namaste. And blessed be. Absolutely. There we go, right? Thank you.
Haul out the holly, pick up the Christmas for my spirit falls again. Fill up the stocking, I may be rushing things, but deck the halls again now. For we need a little Christmas right this very minute. Candles in the window, carols at the spinet. Yes, we need a little Christmas right this very minute. It hasn't snowed a single flurry, but Santa dear, we're in a hurry, so climb down the chimney. Turn up the brightest string of light I've ever seen. Slice up the fruit cake. It's time we hung some tinsel on that evergreen bough. For I've grown a little leaner, grown a little colder, grown a little sadder, grown a little older, and I need a little angel sitting on my shoulder. I need a little Christmas now, for we need a little music, need a little laughter, need a little singing, ringing through the rafter, and we need a little snappy, happy ever after. We need a little Christmas now.
Thank you. Join us for anyone's interested in supporting Afghan refugees, and we'll meet in the library, it looks like, and thanks for being here. PA Choir.